All right. Are we going to do this shit?
We're going to do this shit.
All right.
Welcome to another episode of The Griff Show. I'm Gonzo.
Yep, I'm the Reverend Al, brought to you by the fine taste of 2025, the flavor of fascism. What? No, the flavor to fight fascism.
The flavor to fight fascism.
Malort.
Chicago's finest.
Jepson's Malort.
Oh, God.
The easier it is to sell souls.
There is a new price on freedom, so buy into it while supplies last. Changes need to be made. No more curbside baggage. 7 p.m. curfew. Racial profiling will continue with less bitching. We've unified over who to kill, so until I find more relevant scripture to quote, remember, our God is bigger, stronger, smarter, and much wealthier. So wave those flags with pride, especially the white part.
We're selling addictive 24-hour candlelight vigils in TVs. Freedom will be defended at the cost of civil liberties. The viewers are glued to television screens, stuck, cause lots of things seem too sick. I use opportunities to pluck heartstrings for theme music. I show you which culture to pump your...
So I guess before we do anything, we should start with the news, right?
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right, so it has been another week. I suppose the most recent news that I recall is the official confirmation of Mr. Brainworm heroin addict himself, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., as the Secretary of Health and Human Services for the United States of America.
Yep. Yeah, that was, I don't know if you, I think you saw my TikTok on that, but I had just gotten out of the shower. I hadn't even dried my hair, turned on the news, saw he'd been confirmed, and just, oh, God.
The only Republican who voted against him was Mitch McConnell.
McConnell?
And that is because Mitch McConnell is a polio survivor who would not have gotten polio had the polio vaccine existed when he was a child.
Yeah.
So he personally understands the importance of vaccination, which RFK Jr. does not. He specifically wants to ban the polio vaccine as being unsafe. Now, I'm vaccinated from polio.
Right.
You're vaccinated from polio.
I am. I think twice, actually.
I worry about the children.
Yeah.
Because there are places where polio still exists. We could have eradicated it from the face of the earth, and we haven't yet.
We got close.
So here we are.
We got so close.
And
that's funny story. So my ex-wife, her family, a lot of them are fairly conservative Catholic types, right?
Yeah.
But they range on a spectrum. But on her grandparents' side, really kind of conservative, socially so. You know what? One big thing during COVID that they were big on, though?
What was that?
Vaccination.
Oh, shocking.
You know why?
Why is that?
Because my wife has an aunt, or my ex-wife has an aunt, who, her grandmother, my ex-wife's grandmother, caught the German measles when she was pregnant.
Okay.
Before there was a vaccine available for the measles.
Okay.
And now, if you don't know what happens with German measles and pregnancy, the birth defects are bad. The impacts on the child are horrendous. And so, her aunt had a life expectancy cut, 20 years shorter than should be, was mostly legally blind, about 20 IQ points lower than normally would have been. It's a very sweet person, not dumb, just slow, right?
Yeah.
And about 8 inches shorter than the rest of the family, with a limp at 30, right?
Healthy, good, fine.
That's what a measles outbreak during pregnancy did to that child, right?
Yeah.
And they became huge advocates for vaccination, because
it's vaccination saves lives. I don't know how else to put it. There are always potential risks with any medication. I don't care what it is. It can be anything as simple as a Tylenol. Tylenol can kill you.
Yep.
3.5 grams of Tylenol is enough to kill you.
There's a really specific word for what I get, but I am very prone to getting the symptoms that can respond from the immune system of the disease.
Cytokinic storm.
Yeah. So, but there's if you get there's an immune related word to it, right? And that I get the autoimmune symptoms that a virus gives when I get a vaccine of almost any kind.
Yeah.
And
I watched it happen to you every year you got a COVID booster.
Yes.
And you were miserable for a couple days.
I was miserable for 3 days. I get like bone chilling fever and temperature regulation problems, and it hurts down to my bones. Right. And I'm wiped out for 3 days. But here's the thing: is I would get those same symptoms from my immune system would trigger those same symptoms from the virus itself.
Right. And you'd have the virus.
And I'd have the virus.
On top of that. So that's worse.
That's way worse.
That's way worse.
It's like infinitely worse. I would not want that plus my lungs are going to fill up with fluid and I'm going to die.
Right.
That was awful. So yeah, I don't want to die from this thing and also have that fever. That would be awful.
No. No, it would just be misery.
Yeah, and we've got so many diseases that we've nearly eradicated or have, curtailed greatly.
Smallpox only exists in laboratories.
Yeah. Aren't there kind of like a few tiny pockets in the world left? I thought there might have been.
I don't think there is any left in the wild. As far as I know, there's like a research lab, a military research lab in the U.S., and I believe one in I don't know if it's in Russia or a different former Soviet state.
Okay.
But they are basically the virus is maintained solely in case we need to make more smallpox vaccines.
Wow, that's
like the only reason the virus has not been wiped off the face of the earth is in case it accidentally comes back and we need to ramp up
now it has
vaccination.
It has some wild relatives like cowpox, still existing. Monkeypox, yeah.
And that's why when monkeypox was going around, older gay men, because the monkeypox was primarily being spread amongst the gay male population. Older gay men were protected if they were over 50 because they'd gotten the smallpox vaccination, and it prevents you from contracting monkeypox. So it was only affecting younger gay men. Gotcha. When it was a modest outbreak, it wasn't huge. It was blown out of proportion. People were panicking for really no reason. But yeah, anybody who had the smallpox vaccination was protected from it. If you had cowpox, which is how they discovered the vaccination in the first place, ballsy move. I'm gonna fucking expose my child to smallpox and see if they die. And hey, they didn't.
Right. We first started inoculating with that under like George Washington. Yeah. And again, forced inoculation. The history of vaccine mandates in the United States is amazing.
You can look at a guy like Benjamin Franklin, who went from being staunchly anti-vaccination to like aggressively pro-vaccine mandate.
Yes.
He wanted forced inoculations.
The lockdown of Philadelphia. Yeah. Washington and Franklin won the lockdown. The whole city was locked down. They used the state asked Washington to to call up the militia and use military force to help them secure the city of Philadelphia so that nobody could get in or out because they had yellow fever outbreak.
Yeah, what we went through with COVID was absolutely nothing compared to what this country has been through in the past at the hands of our founding fathers. The people that some like to claim as their model for freedom and why we can't do anything to fix anything because the founders wouldn't like it. Yeah, they were pro lockdown and forced inoculation. Not we'll give you a testing mandate with a vaccination opt out. No, it was you were going to get inoculated whether you fucking like it or not. Take it.
This is I'm going to segue back to this when we get to the later part of the show to talk about our topic because Washington plays a role in that guy's thinking. So I just wanted to so other bullshit in the news because we know RFK. Oh, one more thing about RFK Jr. Actually, I was just talking with another friend of mine. And we know each other mostly over social media these days. But he was a project manager in like big pharma, big medical technology areas, right? And he's done a lot of things with multi-billion-dollar corporations, and he's been on a job hunt for about a year because in his world that's sometimes what happens, a year or two of being out of work while you're looking around.
It happens.
And he just had a series of interviews, and he was in like final rounds, and then the announcement of RFK at HHS was made, and they canceled his last interview. That was like the next steps, right? And they were like, and he realized like kind of immediately, because that company had a big vaccine portfolio, that like they were going to have to like that they were immediately, as soon as that happened, the company started making plans to adjust in case they had to make cuts, right? And that meant freezing their hiring in like senior roles and executive roles.
I need people to understand that despite the way things looked during COVID and with the rollout of the COVID vaccines in general are not money makers for the companies that manufacture them.
No.
Just treating the symptoms of the diseases that vaccines prevent would be far, far, far more profitable. In fact, the people who are anti-vaccine are also the ones who are most inclined to talk about how big pharma just wants to treat your symptoms and not actually cure the disease. Like, those are mutually exclusive ideas you're holding in your head. You can't say that all big pharma cares about is treating the symptoms and not curing the disease, and then come at them when they're doing something that does not make them as much money to prevent the disease from happening at all.
Yep, there are basically like 3 buckets of vaccines when it comes to the econ of them, right? There's the ones that are really critically necessary, but they're loss leaders, and the government partially subsidizes...
The flu vaccine.
Yep. The government partially subsidizes their manufacture, their distribution. They're basically free at damn near every pharmacy in the country, right? And that's just so that we don't lose 30 to 80,000 people a year.
For no reason.
For no reason, right? And the cost of manufacturing it is relatively high compared to the output. Then there's the second bucket where it's like pennies on the dollar, right? Where you make, 1-2% on it for producing it, but it makes you some money.
You're making a certain volume.
Right. And then there's the third one where it's like dirt cheap to make the vaccination, and so you can sell it for $8 to $12, but it only costs $1 and you make a good margin, but you're going to sell a few million of them. So you'll make, you will make $60 million, right?
Yeah.
But that's it. That's all you make, and you're a multi-billion-dollar corporation. But if you have a big portfolio of like 4 of those, right, and you're selling 1 billion vaccines a year, right, now you're talking like $2 billion, right? Now, that's not high margin. Big Pharma makes way better margins than everything else.
Yeah, their maintenance medications, the fractions of a penny per dose to produce, and sometimes hundreds to thousands of dollars per dose at the same time.
But you can crush a company by taking $1 billion of profit away from them out of there, right? Even if it's
super low margin.
Super low margin.
Yeah.
If that $1 billion in profit out of their giant portfolio goes away, goes bye-bye, or becomes like the subject of like massive government intervention.
It's an existential threat to the company.
Yeah. And so that's why they're having these pharmaceutical companies are scaling back, and they're worried. Rightly so.
I don't blame them. I would be too. I mean, I am worried. Just as someone who gives a shit about the idea of public health.
Yeah.
And, RFK's got a lot of other crazy ideas, like his fucking wants to take everybody off ADHD and antidepressant medications.
And put us in camps.
Like, do I
have
think
ADHD, I deserve to be in a
camp.
camp.
Do I think they're going to put us in camps? No. Is it unacceptable that this is something that we even have to think about? Yeah, goddamn is.
Yeah, it shouldn't have been.
We shouldn't have to think about that.
Shouldn't have been said, shouldn't have been brought up, shouldn't have. That's insane. But we're even talking about it and thinking about it is insane, and that's where we're at.
I guess in other confirmation news, we have the confirmation of probably the single greatest national security risk of all time.
Yep.
In Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah.
JFK, Hegseth, Linda McMahon, these people are fundamentally unqualified for the positions they've been nominated for. RFK. Fundamentally unqualified for the positions they were nominated for and confirmed to be.
RFK, I would argue, is as dangerous as Tulsi in different ways.
Right. But she is a specific known threat to national security.
Correct.
She is known to be a Russian asset. Paid.
Yes.
Paid Russian asset. Not only does this put our intelligence at risk of being given to foreign adversaries, it means that our allies are not going to share information with us the way they otherwise might.
Correct. Yeah.
They're not going to feel safe with their sensitive data being in our hands, with her being in charge of national intelligence.
Tulsi Gabbard. So, and I'm going to say it, 2016, 2020, the Tulsi Gabbard stands on the left, the folks who shifted from Bernie to Tulsi.
The Jimmy Dores of the world.
The Jimmy Dores of the world.
She's not going to fuck you, bro.
Yeah. the Jimmy Dores of the world, all the way down to the dipshits at fucking bars that we know of that just went hard for Tulsi.
Yeah.
Like, here's the problem. She was kind of cute. She looks a little rough up close and personal now when you see her, but she was kind of cute. And she talked about a couple of anti-imperialist things. At the same time, she was angry at Obama for not bombing enough Muslims.
Well, she is a Hindu nationalist.
Yes.
It's easy to forget that. She is part of a weird religious cult and a Hindu nationalist independent of that. Those are two separate things.
Yes. She demanded that Obama expand the war on terror. What she didn't want was nation building. She didn't want the U.S. spending money in states that we'd blown up. She didn't want the United States government helping the states that we had expanded the war on terror into. What she demanded, though, was that we do more bombing. She did that many times. That's not an anti-war voice. Anybody who tells me she's an anti-war voice, I swear to Christ, you are either living under a rock, you're delusional, or you don't understand what anti-war means.
It is very important to understand that in our current political climate, there is no such thing as a fully anti-war voice.
Right.
They don't exist.
They
have preferred wars.
Yeah.
They have preferred military actions, preferred military theaters.
I'm not stupid enough to pretend I'm anti-war. Nobody is. And
I mean, you can't be totally anti-war because then you're saying that you would not engage in a defensive war.
Exactly.
And sometimes you don't. Sometimes another party doesn't give you a choice. You look at a country like Ukraine. They did not have a choice but to fight a war against Russia when Russia actively invaded them.
Now,
which is what happened despite what some on the left tried to say otherwise for some fucking reason.
Now, you see, the dumb, quote-unquote, pretend anti-war voices in the United States, they take their anti-war position to mean that Ukraine should have just given up, capitulated as soon as they were invaded, given the aggressor whatever they wanted.
The only proper response to aggression is capitulation.
Right.
Which is, that's how you get fascism.
Yeah, good old, I mean, that's some Neville Chamberlain shit right there. That's worse than Neville Chamberlain, because he didn't even do it. He was just like slowly, quietly appeasing the Nazis on the other side of the country.
If I could have a message for, say, I don't know, Hakeem Jeffries, it would be that capitulation is how you end up with fascism. Hakeem.
Yeah.
You bitch.
Now, I see some people arguing that you guys are doing everything you can. And look, I do get that you are making some noise.
That's like we talked about last week. The only power they have right now is optics.
Right.
But saying that you have no power is bad optics.
Yes. 100%.
Like, it's dumb. Don't do that. Don't let your enemy know you have no power, even if it's true.
Right.
What are you fucking doing? I can't do anything. Stop them. Like, what? They're just going to walk all over you.
We can do what we want. No. You can say we're going to do everything we can to oppose them. You can say we're going to block anything and everything we can.
Yeah, you're going to say
any means necessary.
We are not going to allow any legislation to advance.
Yeah.
You can say that states' attorneys generals, when Trump takes executive action that is illegal, are going to sue and prevent him from being able to do that.
You know, we learned under Obama that the House minority has the ability to sue the administration. That's happened.
Yeah.
And they did it and won, even though there was a majority. What they were doing was gumming up everything so that Obama had to do things through executive order.
And
then they just sued him for it. And on several cases, they won. Now, I understand our court system has been co-opted as well.
And yet, Trump has been denied over and over again by justices appointed by Ronald Reagan, appointed by George H.W. Bush, appointed by W, and appointed by himself.
Yes. He doesn't have complete control over things. Now, he may have gotten a nice ideological lockdown on the Supreme Court, but there's still...
Even then, I don't know how much of a lockdown he's going to have if he pushes as hard as he wants to.
Aside from Alito and Thomas, those two dipshits.
They are lost causes forever.
They're lost causes forever. But Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Barrett, in their own individual ways, have a judicial philosophy that's grounded somewhere in the law. Now, I don't agree with it. I think they're wrong a lot.
Yes.
Right? But each of those three, in different and distinct ways, right, has some form of judicial philosophy grounded in the law and some respect for one or two of the amendments and one or two parts of the jurisprudence of our history, like stare decisis through history, right?
Yeah.
All three of them have some variation of that. Now, that doesn't mean that they're safe. They're all ideologicals. They're all Federalist Society weirdos, right?
And that everything that comes with the Federalist Society is a plague on the nation.
Yeah, and each of them is awful in their own way. And if you get the right case that tailors to the way that 2 out of the 3 of them are awful, you have a guaranteed win in the court, right? Because, weirdly enough, Roberts is going to be our swing vote forever now.
And Barrett has been surprising a couple times.
Yes, she has.
I have been, of all of the new in the last 10 years appointed new Supreme Court justice, she is the only one who has pleasantly surprised me.
Gorsuch did on a small handful of items, and that's because he's slightly skeptical of policing power and slightly skeptical of agency power in some of the right ways, usually the wrong ways. He hated Chevron. He hated Chevron doctrine, which is funny because his mother was, in part the reason Chevron doctrine even exists. She was in the EPA when that case happened.
I also need people to understand that executive orders, when the president writes an executive order, he is explaining how the executive branch is going to administer the law.
Right.
These aren't laws.
Right.
They're not laws.
They're rules.
They're rules for how the departments under the executive are going to handle themselves.
Yeah.
What they're going to do. If he makes an executive order that says the Gulf of Mexico is the Gulf of America, that means that the executive branch is going to call it the Gulf of America. That does not mean that Apple and Google have to call it the Gulf of America, and it doesn't mean you have to call it the Gulf of America either.
And why they are, it's flooring me.
It's just weird Orwellian bullshit.
Yes,
it's just thought crime bullshit.
Speaking of which, the AP, banning the AP from the White House entirely until they change their style guide to say that to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. It's the Gulf of Mexico.
And Carolyn Leavitt came very close to saying that it has always been the Gulf of America.
It was...
You could see her holding back.
Yeah.
Because even I think she knew that would have been a step too far at this point. But it won't always be. Because I guarantee you, by next summer at the latest, we are going to hear that it has always been the Gulf of America. What are you talking about? There is no Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, I challenge all of you to go read this section of 1984 about chocolate rations.
Yeah.
That's chocolate rations.
That is the most telling part for us right now,
Yes.
I think.
And read that portion of 1984 and then look at what the administration says and does. And by that I mean what they're going to do is they're going to tell you one thing, do another, and then tell you that it always was that way.
Yes.
Minor little
technical change. Oh, that's better.
Oh, that is better.
That's better.
He needed to move a fan. His
I need to
apartment's
move
a
a
little
fan.
stuffy.
I live in a fucking hot box. This fucking place.
Yeah. Is that south facing?
It's due east.
Due east. Ah, yes.
Due east with no shade.
Yeah, that explains
on
it.
the second floor.
So,
which I don't actually live in a basement. I get that comment a lot. I have a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. I live on the second floor by myself. It's a pretty sweet deal. I have a lot of space, 1,100 square feet, all to me.
That's very nice.
Not a basement. You know what, though? I'll say this right now. This is a little rant. I would love to just live in someone's basement for free. If I had an extra $1,400 a month spending money, I would go fucking... The economy would improve locally. If I had an extra $1,400 a month, I could just spend on bullshit.
Do you know how much I don't like paying for a 1,480 square foot 3-2 by myself in a house?
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
My electric bill fucking huge. I don't even keep my AC all that low, but it's just maintaining it because it's got a ton of fucking windows and lots of natural
my
light.
summer electric bill can hit $300.
Yeah,
it's outrageous.
$450.
Outrageous.
It's insane.
Fucking Duke.
But that's what I get for look at all this natural light.
Yeah, having an entire door wall that we're sitting in front of doesn't help much.
I got a room that's got windows on 3 sides, and it's a wide space to walk into. Then windows all along, and it's nice. It's well lit.
Yeah.
Back when I used to have that as my office, it was nice because I could look out and see my my avocado tree.
Beautiful.
The palm trees. Florida's nice.
What else news-wise
so
has
much.
happened? So much.
So Hegseth and his really disturbing comments about Ukraine.
It did feel like they went into these talks between Russia and Ukraine as a mouthpiece for the Russian government.
It did. All of a sudden, immediately, foreclosing the idea that the United States would allow Ukraine into NATO, just right off the gate. Basically trying to suggest that Ukraine has to cede territory right off the gate. Bam.
We can't. Yeah, there's no going back to the 2014 borders.
Yeah.
It's just that can't happen. It's impossible.
It's
been 11 years.
Things like the United States trying to trade, basically take over mineral rights in exchange for aid. This is all dangerous stuff, and we're playing this game with Europe's big, large, fucking centralized state at the edge of the Russian border, right? And it is currently a bulwark between Russian imperialist ambitions outside of its borders, as far as irredentism, the idea that it wants to take over everything that the Russian Empire or the USSR ever held.
Right.
Which is gave that speech. He gave that speech.
Literal blood and soil speech.
Yes. He said that was part of their goal, their plan, that anything that had been part of Russia or the USSR was their territory and would be taken back.
Reestablishing the Russian Empire.
Yeah. And so when you think about that, that's a lot. And it's a lot of other countries' territories. It's little pieces of Finland. It's little pieces of Sweden.
It's every country, almost every country that ends in stan.
Yeah. Every country that
except
ends in
stan. Except for Pakistan and Afghanistan. Yeah. Everybody else.
But they're going to think they own Afghanistan too.
Well, they've learned that one the hard way.
Do you think?
And then we learned what blowback was.
Do you think Putin learns lessons? I'm not sure.
I think he learns from lessons. I think he learns how to not make the same mistakes.
Yeah, fair.
Which is something, if there's one thing I will give that man credit for, he knows how to not make the same mistake twice.
Yes. Now, he doesn't know how to get out of a big-ass mistake.
No, and he knows how to make brilliant new mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
But he knows how to not make the same mistake twice, which if there's one thing we could learn,
it's how to not make the same mistake
keep making the same mistake over and over again.
2016, 2024, same mistake?
Yeah.
No. But yeah, so that was unhinged, and of course, Ukraine being basically the breadbox of Central Europe and parts of Eurasia.
It's one of the largest grain producers on Earth.
Yep, it's got a big software industry,
huge
minerals industry. Yeah, huge minerals industry. This is a big impact on the global economy, and Russia, once they get a lockdown in this stuff and they are able to control energy pipelines, they are going to exert their power and influence outside of it. And now, I'm not so sure we want a dictator doing that. But some people love dictators.
We will find out.
The guy we're going to talk about later.
Yeah, we will find out. We don't have a choice. We're going to find out. There's nothing we can do to stop finding out at this point. We had our chance.
Here's the thing. I think Ukraine, even without our aid, can win. I do. I think that they've held Russia off at this point long enough that they can keep it an ugly quagmire, breaking Russia piece by piece until they have to pull out.
Afghanistan did.
Yeah. Afghanistan did.
Even with our funding and our training, they were far, far, far less funded than the Ukrainians are right now.
Yeah, I mean, we were funding the Mujahideen. We weren't giving them big weaponry. It was
we were giving them fucking machine guns and some modest training.
Yeah, and some fucking shoulder rockets. It was
the occasional RPG.
And France just sent fucking more fighter jets to Ukraine. They're getting fighter jets.
We might stop supporting Ukraine, but Europe isn't because they see it as a fucking firewall.
Yeah, it's because they see it as a potential existential threat to them, and it in many ways probably is.
Yeah.
Other things in the news. Go over real quick. So there's Trump signs a plan for reciprocal tariffs on U.S. trading partners. Lots of economic uncertainty there. Now, so yes, there's a lot of countries that have tariffs on the U.S. Most of them are fairly small.
Yeah.
Also, in a lot of these cases, they don't have the layers of taxation that we do in their own country, right? Mm-hmm. So they have tariffs on imports because they have a lot of imports or exports, right?
Right.
And that is part of their base funding strategy because relative to the scale and size of their economy, it works for them.
It makes sense.
Right. But so small tariffs to a degree when they don't have as many layers of taxation, because remember Americans, we like to pretend that like Europe or the rest of the world is way higher taxed than us when we're actually towards the high middle.
Yeah.
Right. Because we have state taxes.
They have higher income taxes.
Yeah.
But that's,
we have state income taxes in most states. A few don't. We have sales taxes in
sales
most
taxes
states.
are inherently regressive all the time.
We have the federal income tax. We've got corporate income taxes. We have capital gains taxes, which are shockingly low, personally, I think.
Is it 15% right now?
Yeah.
That's insane.
We have local taxes in like the large city areas. We have property taxes, and we have a number of other like taxes and fees that get layered at different stages throughout the economy. When you add it all up, we are one of the higher taxed. We're towards the very high middle out of the rest of the world's taxes, and so. Yeah, and it's multi-layered. Now, not every country has multi-layered taxation. They just have a few different types of taxes. So they have a tariff that in part funds their small government because they have a tiny government because they're a small country. We are big.
We have tried to fund the government with tariffs before when the country was substantially smaller than it is right now, and it was fucking disastrous.
It was an absolute disaster.
Absolutely disastrous. Economically fucking apocalyptic.
Yeah, and deepened the depression, and like every time we've increased tariffs, it has been horrible for the United States.
At a minimum, it made the Great Depression worse. I have seen people argue that Smoot-Hawley caused the Depression.
Right.
That if they had not done those tariffs when they did those tariffs, the Depression might not have become the Great Depression.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll never know for sure.
We can't
at this point
tease it out. But what we can know is that tariffs, throughout the first basically 180 years we were using tariffs, were not good for us every time.
Speaking of things that we can't know for sure that I saw in the news, Anna Paulina Luna.
Oh, God.
Who is that? She's your representative, right?
I believe
she's my representative.
She when I lived downtown, she wasn't. God, I miss
has announced that she is reopening the investigation into the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Yeah, it's stupid.
And that she intends to interview every member of the Warren Commission and every single physician involved in the investigation, which is a problem because...
When was the Warren Commission again?
1964.
That was
61 years ago.
61 years?
The last member of the Warren Commission died 19 years ago.
That was 61 years ago. So,
yeah.
The age of a physician... To be a doctor, even 64 years ago, when they didn't have to go to quite as much college, right?
You were still in your 30s at a minimum.
You were in your 20s, late 20s, early 30s.
And if you were like working on the president, you were an esteemed physician who had worked his way up. You were in your late 30s, early 40s.
Well, apparently at Parkland Hospital, like it was all hands on deck that day.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because I mean, they brought in JFK,
but they are.
You ever see the movie on that Parkland? It was really good.
They are all dead.
Yeah. They're all fucking dead.
They're all dead.
The youngest of them would be like 98 at the onset. The youngest person that would have been in the room, maybe a nurse who could have been like 22, right, would be like 83.
What sort of information... Let's assume this person was still alive.
Yeah.
What sort of information are you going to get from someone 61 years later about an emergency situation that they were involved in when it was a panic situation?
Right. When they were like a nurse.
And they were all doing their one specific individual role to the exclusion of all other considerations.
Yeah. Like, They were, the only couple living people who could have been involved at that hospital would have been like young nurses and some, maybe medical interns, med students, right? And they wouldn't have been directly involved. They wouldn't have had any real information. What Anna Paulina Luna, this is why I actually don't even pay much, even though she's my congresswoman.
She's insane.
I
She's
can't pay
insane and
attention
dumb.
to her.
The only other thing,
It's just a waste of my time.
other thing she's done was propose a bill to put Trump's face on Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. Paying attention to her. I don't care that she's my representative. Paying attention to her existence wastes my time and energy.
Dear 13th District of Florida.
I hate her. Stupid.
Do not. I don't care if you're a Republican. Primary this lunatic.
Yeah.
She is making your party look even dumber than your party looks on its own already.
Right. So, and they look dumb. She's an idiot. And that's... her existence is a part of the zone flood to me, right? It's just...
Yeah, I mean, our district Our district map was drawn specifically so she had a chance at winning.
Right.
Because she couldn't before. That's why our previous representative was Charlie Crist, whose politics did not change in the teeniest, tiniest bit between him going from being a Republican to being a Democrat.
Yeah, his
politics were identical.
He was a socially liberal Rockefeller Republican 30 years ago and stayed there.
He was not a cataclysmically bad governor.
Yeah, he wasn't
anything shockingly cool or great.
No,
but he wasn't bad.
He was fine. He was fine.
Yeah, he was willing to take federal money for infrastructure projects before the subsequent guy decided to say that he didn't want that filthy Obama money.
Right, all just for optics. It was all dumb, and they tried to take it. They tried to take that money every time, and reappropriate it for something else.
Speaking of taking money,
New York City.
This is if there's anything that should really concern everyone, deeply, deeply concern everyone, it's this story out of New York.
Yeah, so the New York City comptroller came out and made a statement that about $80 million had been taken out of the city's bank account that had been given for FEMA funding. For a variety of different things, right? That had been through the appropriations process.
Gone through Congress. Congress approved the money.
Then it went to FEMA. FEMA approved the programs, gave the money to the state.
Deposited it in their city bank account.
Yep. And it has been there since the last administration. It's not recent money.
No.
Right? And on basically Musk's orders, was it?
Probably. The problem is it's hard to know.
Right, but it seems like it was on Musk's
lack of transparency.
That they just reached into the account and took it back without informing anyone, telling anyone, just stole the money.
Just stole it. Now, I need you to understand that, if you have ever had your tax refund direct deposited, you know your bank account.
And
do I think they're just going to steal money out of your account? I don't think so.
They will, actually. I'll let you know.
They can.
They do.
They can.
If there's an overpayment or there was a mistake from the Treasury, or you owe them monies under certain circumstances, like you owe a debt to student loans, things like that, or the federal government, you owe them debt.
They can take your money.
They will reach in and just take your money. But usually they do it with more notice than this.
And usually there's some vague oversight. Yeah. And there's a process.
And there's a law that says they can. In this case, there isn't.
You have to be behind on payments to the point where it's you are not fulfilling your end of this bargain.
Right. Now, with a Treasury overpayment, that one actually they just...
that's them fucking up.
Yeah, they fuck up. And
that's money they shouldn't have given you in the first place.
Yes.
But, this is not
usually within, 2 weeks.
This is not like you do your taxes are accepted, your taxes are correct, they give you a $1,000 refund, and then yoink.
Right. But this isn't like that. It's the city of New York went through a process, got the money approved. This is all appropriated. This is legal. It was their money.
All above board.
And there's nothing in the law that allows for this to have been done. And that's the lawlessness that should really concern everyone. So that happened, and that's insane. And it can happen to any city, any state. They can do it for
anything,
because they're just doing it.
They have the power to do that.
And it's illegal.
And it's 19 to 24-year-olds who have access to all of this information.
Yeah.
6 19 to 24-year-olds who have never touched a boob.
It's fucking insane.
Right? They have never been in the same room as a naked woman.
Yep. Top federal prosecutor in New York resigns after being told to drop the charges on Adams.
Good.
Which for her.
Good for her.
And also,
fuck Eric Adams.
That is one of the most corrupt things I have ever seen.
You know, Eric Adams is corrupt enough you would think he's a governor. He's a mayor of Chicago.
Yeah. Or a governor of Chicago.
Or governor of Chicago.
Or Illinois. Governor of Illinois.
Governor of Illinois.
Because they've had, 4 of them go to prison, speaking of which, Blagojevich was just pardoned by Trump.
Blagojevich was pardoned. The most corrupt Illinois governor of all time, probably.
Yeah, probably. And he was trying to literally sell Obama's Senate seat and got caught on tape.
You gotta make me a good deal here.
And got caught on tape.
I got gold.
Trying to sell this shit.
I got gold here. This is worth so much money. What are you gonna pay me?
Right?
To be a senator from Illinois.
What am I gonna fucking get for a Senate seat? It's got 2 more years or a lot of time on it.
And
2 or 3 years.
Obama's Justice Department prosecuted him.
Yep.
And sent him to prison where he belonged.
Where he fucking belonged.
You can't violate the public trust that way.
Yep. And
you shouldn't be able to anyway.
And Trump just gave him a full pardon for it.
Full pardon. I mean, he'd already been released from prison.
Yeah, but it's just the
official clearing his name. It was Trump who commuted his sentence last time, right?
Yep. Yeah. The official clearing his name and
as if it never happened.
Yeah, it's like it's bullshit. But yeah, so Eric Adams is having his entire corruption case against him dropped in exchange, quite explicitly. They're not even pretending it's not a quid pro quo.
They're openly admitting that's what happened.
That they have done it in exchange for policy changes in the city government and for him to reverse his policies that were there from his predecessor and the predecessor before it in regards to immigration, and that he ran on maintaining because that's what the voters of the city of New York wanted. He is going to reverse those policies and allow the federal government to do more enforcement of an immigration policy and use the NYPD city resources in full refusal to in full disregard for the voters of the city of New York. Complete disregard for their will. And he's going to do this in order to get himself out of a criminal case. That is absolutely criminal.
It is
from the top of the DOJ down.
It's as unambiguously corrupt as you get. There's no other word for it than corruption.
This is absolute tin pot dictator
bullshit. I assume that this means that Eric Adams is suddenly MAGA's favorite Democrat.
Probably.
He's suddenly one of the good ones.
Yeah. Oh, what the fuck?
My contempt for people who still support Donald Trump is essentially infinite. Because you know what? Even up through this last election, if you voted for him because whatever reason, I don't care, and you get to this point and you're like, this isn't what I voted for, I don't like this. You know what? You fucked up. You realize you fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to work with you to fix the problem that you caused.
Right.
But if it is February 13th, 2025, and you are looking at everything that this administration is doing, you're saying, I want more of this, you are so far beyond dead to me and irredeemable, I don't even have the words to express it.
Yep.
I hate you. I hope you suffer infinitely for all time. I hope hell exists so I can storm the gates one day and hunt you for fucking sport there.
Okay. Fair. So.
Yes.
Cybertrucks. Armored Cybertruck.
Armored Cybertrucks.
Now, Musk is apparently...
Are they armored Cybertrucks or armored Teslas more broadly? Because I didn't see a news story that specified what Elon Musk was being given $400 million for.
The story I heard were Cybertrucks for the State Department.
That makes sense. They look stupid, and the military does like dumb-looking vehicles.
Now, as of today, Musk denies it, but apparently that his denial may not be true, and that there could be the State Department is looking to buy these things.
He did just recently say that some of the things he says aren't going to be true.
Yes.
So
I mean,
got that going for us.
While he made Donald Trump sit in the resolute cuck chair, and
at the cuck desk,
and gave a press conference from the Oval Office
for the president.
For the president, on behalf. Just he spoke for him while Trump just sat there.
The only person
like
who spoke to the president was Elon's 4-year-old child, whose name sounds like a modem starting up.
Yep.
And what did that child say to the president of the United States of America?
Told him that he wasn't really the president, that he should leave.
And that he should shush his mouth.
Shush his mouth, yep.
Shush your mouth.
So that kid just dunked on Donald Trump.
And I don't know.
Hard.
I don't know if you know this about 4-year-olds, but they don't just come up with that shit on their own. They parrot what they hear.
Yeah, I mean, they'll sometimes say some weird shit.
I've said things and then had 4-year-olds repeat it and be like, "Oh, I fucked up."
Yeah, they'll sometimes say some weird shit, but they heard it from somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? And now, like, I don't know. Maybe he heard this from Dad. But
when they say shit that's like totally out of their own and unhinged, it's like the people in the walls say they don't like you.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
it's very.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Like they will say some really.
It's like they're staring in the same corner the cat and the dog is, just looking at something that no one else can see, and you're like, "What are you seeing?" It's like, they don't like you. They say it's time for you to go.
And then he wants to make your skin my skin. Like, whoa, okay. You know, that's what they'll say. But no, this was very direct, and it would seem like it was something that he'd heard repeated, and basically,
as an unusually politically aware small child, would have never occurred to me to say that to Reagan in 1985.
Right. But so Elon just cucked the shit out of Trump,
and Trump supporters took it.
Yep.
Which I am quite proud of the numbers that particular TikTok did.
Yeah.
I was just under 15,000 views the last time I checked. Yeah.
Well done.
Which also reminds me, we went from 48 to, last I looked, 63 subscribers on this fine channel. So welcome to all of you new viewers, all 15 of you. We are happy to have you here. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your loved ones. Like and subscribe.
Yeah, we have been plugging the shit out of this show on our TikTok.
Yeah.
Because why not?
Why not? It's probably only going to last another 45 days.
Yeah, besides, we want you to give us all your money.
Someday we will figure out a mechanism that you can do that through.
But we want to do this in a hot tub, and we need hot tub money, and we want to be able to one day just blow up a Cybertruck for fun.
Oh, that would be pretty cool. I have never experienced a 5,000 degree lithium fire before, and that sounds exciting.
If you want us to blow up a Cybertruck for fun,
we're going to need the money to do that.
So
I don't have the money to do that.
Subscribe, share, talk about our podcast, tell people that you listen to The Grift. I don't know why you would, because we're just two bearded idiots in Florida talking politics. But tell us so that we can get the money to blow up a Cybertruck.
And I'll say, it is weird to think that 15,000 people saw my stupid face say things with my stupid voice.
You know, weirdly enough,
that's weird.
The one video that I had that had like 16,000 views on TikTok was about like what was coming up on like episode 3.
Nice.
That was great.
We're now on. This was episode 11. Yeah. This is episode 11. Yeah. We've been doing this for 12 weeks now because we skipped one for Christmas.
Correct. Yeah. Speaking of money, though, lots of money, piles of money, so much money, all your money,
a lot of spending money.
The CFPB. It's getting gutted and basically made completely ineffective. The law, he can't get rid of the agency. There's too much law
but outside of perhaps the EPA that has stopped the rivers from catching fire.
Right.
There aren't many federal agencies that have done more direct good for the American people than the CFPB.
Yeah. The FDA and making sure our food's safe. Because I mean, if you read Upton Sinclair, that shit was real.
Yeah, go read The Jungle, and then you'll figure out a lot of things about why we have the agencies that we do.
Right.
Did you ever find a fingernail in your hot dog? You will.
But yeah, the CFPB has this minuscule. Now it's going around. Elon Musk, he wants to return their $780 million.
I hope you enjoy your $2 check.
Yeah, it's $2.
$2 per person.
It's $4 per taxpayer.
Right.
So $2 per American, $4 per taxpayer.
I will spend that $4 on 2 eggs.
Right. Meanwhile, every few months, the CFPB returns or gets back to taxpayers billions, and it saves taxpayers.
It's been
billions.
something like $21, $22 billion so far directly returned to consumers.
Directly returned to consumers, plus with the consent decrees, right? And the like rule changes that they've implemented over the industries that they oversee, right? Mm-hmm. It's been like 4 times that in actual dollars saved to consumers. Because it's prevented companies from doing certain things.
It is absolutely a net positive for the American people, and that's why they want to get rid of it.
So we're looking at $140 billion worth of like saving and your money kept in your pockets since this agency was founded at a cost of a few $1 billion.
If you don't like banks and credit cards ripping you off, you need to like the CFPB.
Yep. That's really all there is to it.
Yeah.
And it's sad that they're gutting it. After delays, CDC releases data signaling bird flu spread undetected in cows. So yeah, the CDC was shut down and dark for weeks, and now they are like, oh yeah, it's been spreading through the cows a lot. That's great. Love it.
It's important to understand that avian flu has, at this point, as far as we can tell, a 50% mortality rate. I don't think anyone can fully appreciate what that means. I don't know that I can. Like, I know what that means, and I don't think I can actually appreciate the idea that we could be facing a disease that, if it were to achieve human-to-human contact, would kill literally half of the people who contracted it.
Yep.
Now, in fairness, as diseases and viruses evolve and achieve greater communicability, they do tend to become less virulent. Mm-hmm. But you'd still probably be looking at a 25 to 30% mortality rate, which is not something we have experienced in the modern era at all.
No, and it would be horrendous.
That's Black Death levels.
Yeah,
that's a third of the population dead.
Yeah,
like
that's worse than the 1917 flu.
You can't understand that. You can't. I can't.
I can't comprehend.
I understand that I can't understand that. I don't know if you understand that you can't understand that.
Yep. Oh, speaking of that, like research, basic research.
Yeah.
The cuts to education and the gutting of the Department of Education and the current plans and proposals that they're making. Like, just as one example, the University of Utah is looking at $43.5 million in research expenses that are going to be like burnt up through these programs.
I know Katie Britt is very upset about this, but the single largest employer in the state of Alabama, which is the state she represents in the Senate, is the University of Alabama. Mm-hmm. The largest employer in the state. They employ more people than anybody else in the state. A huge chunk of their funding comes from the NIH because they do a lot of basic medical research there.
Right.
All of that funding being cut off means that the largest employer in the state of Alabama does not have the money to employ the people that it employs.
Yeah. So the thing that I know that a lot of MAGA folks think they're happy about all this. They do.
They have convinced themselves that they are very excited about everything that's going on right now.
Like, we are currently at the lowest percentage of federal employees to the proportion of the labor force in history, right? We peaked out under Roosevelt at just under 8%.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's been slowly going down a little bit ever since, with some years where it spiked up.
Yeah.
But overall, it's averaged like 3 to 5% roughly between like 1939 and like 1980, right? Yeah. Then after 1980, it started like really ticking down even more, right? So it was actually like averaging 4 to 5% and over that time, and then like it started ticking down since 80, right? Now we're at just under 2. Okay, but still 2% of the labor force.
That's huge.
That's massive. And in localized economies, it's even bigger, because these are,
and it tends to be red states.
Yep, they're red states, or they're big purple blue states, right? Like Virginia, Maryland.
This is predominantly going to hurt the people who voted for Trump.
Yeah, and it's going to put whole local economies out of business. You look at how much of Kansas is tied up in federal funding.
And it's not just the direct jobs; it's the jobs that those jobs support. It's the industries that those industries support. It's little things like the coffee shop on the corner that gets all of the federal employees coming in every morning. those federal employees go away, that coffee shop goes away.
Yeah.
That's a small business gone. You people love small businesses. I love small businesses. I want small businesses to be the primary businesses in this country.
Yeah, and so here's the thing, is we've had this argument about, like, laissez-faire neoliberalism versus Keynesian economics over the decades. And Keynesian economics won.
Just,
right?
Absolutely
on
no
data,
question about it.
On both data and popular policy, right? You're the voters plus the data.
You cannot like that, but you're mistaken. You are incorrect. Right. You have been lied to.
And so
you have been propagandized.
What they are doing right now, though, is attempting to basically just gut the shit out of things and say, well, you know what, the market will fix it.
Yep.
Right? But they're not going to do that for themselves because, again, they're also looking at massive tax cuts and huge contracts. And if you notice, there are all of these industry billionaires in the room who are looking at contracts right now.
Yeah.
And their stock portfolios are Palantir. It's expected to get massive contracts because they're so integrated into this new administration that their stock just went gangbusters.
Right.
Like, that's criminal, right? So they're not actually planning on helping anybody. They're going to make themselves really fucking rich and fuck us.
You have to understand that these people see an opportunity in the total economic collapse of both the United States and the dollar.
Yeah, they do.
They believe that they have the ability to make more money. Elon Musk wants to be the world's first trillionaire, and he thinks that destroying the federal government is the way to do that, and he's probably correct. I don't want to live through the consequences of that, and neither should you.
Yeah, because they're going to get rich while the rest of us suffer.
Yeah. Right. So I believe there is something that you wanted to talk about.
Oh, yeah. Man, I had a great part of this weekend. Judging a chili cook-off was great. It's fantastic.
We'll give a shout-out to Winston. That was some damn fine chili. He deserved to win, hands down. It was what I expect a chili to be when I eat a chili in every possible... It was elevated in every possible way. A perfect chili.
But I got to eat 6 different chilies.
They were all very good.
They were all very good.
Not a bad chili among them.
Not a bad one. And I was very happy with the results of that. But... that was what we were doing during the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And then
the lead up.
Oh, the beauty.
The beauty of the Philadelphia Eagles absolutely curb stomping the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, I enjoyed that so much.
I enjoyed that intensely. I don't give a shit about football, but I love watching the Eagles win, and I love seeing the people of Philadelphia happy because they deserve to be happy. I love that city. It is my favorite city in the United States of America. And they deserve nothing but good things.
And Kansas City had been in this weird, like, dominant, like, doing too good, kind of getting cocky about it thing.
They had become the Patriots, what the Patriots used to be.
Yep.
Nobody liked the Patriots.
Nope. And then, miraculously, they decided that they were going to become, like, super friendly to Donald Trump. Right before
shaking his hand, he said they were going to win.
Yep, and
did they win?
They did not. No.
And I like that it wasn't just a loss; it was a fucking embarrassment of a loss.
Yes, it was. But the real show, the real show was the halftime show that everybody's talking about.
It is in the running for best Super Bowl halftime show of all time.
I would agree.
The only halftime show I could say you could make a case for being better was Prince, and that's because Prince is Prince.
Yes.
And that was musically
right.
Something unusually special.
Exactly. And playing Purple Rain.
Him playing Purple Rain in the rain. That was transcendent. But it did not have the spectacle and meaning of what we got.
And what I loved about this was that the spectacle of this one was spectacular but subdued, generally speaking. And there's a lot of people complaining, mostly white guys of a certain age,
older 50-year-old white dudes in Oakleys with goatees, Van Dykes technically.
And now there's some other people complaining about it because it wasn't the production.
Matt Walsh isn't people.
Hey, there's that too.
Neither is Ted Nugent.
There are some folks I know that actually just like Kendrick, but they watch the Super Bowl halftime show for the production of it, like the set and the like dancers and the fireworks and the lighting are the show.
Right.
I don't like that shit. I never have. I always thought it took away from the music.
I want it to fit the music.
Right.
Like, I want the spectacle to work artistically with the music. Sometimes you need lots of fireworks and fucking flames and shit.
But I always
Sometimes
thought
that doesn't make sense.
I always thought that just it was too much in general, like that, you know, because they're just doing this montage of portions of their songs, and it's like all this set, right? This one, on the other hand, it had so much to it. The spectacle of it was the story that it told.
And it did tell a story over the course of the entire almost 13 minutes.
Right. And opening up with Samuel L. Jackson as Uncle Sam, which I personally believe there's a bit of a double entendre, a hidden... Now, I have no confirmation of this. It's not a phrase that I generally use myself, but I'm a big fan of Immortal Technique, who has used this as a phrase in a lot of his songs. The concept of Samboism, which is also a reference to a subservient black person, right? Someone who's servile and supports the you know, like the white establishment. You know, what you would call your Uncle Tom, right? Or your, you know, the house versus the field argument, debate, right? I'm a white guy. I don't want to get too much into it, but I saw the way that juxtaposition was happening, and knowing Kendrick and the way he utilizes lyrics and the way he digs into the meaning of words, and that everything he says has more meaning than just the line, I would not be surprised if that was the hat tip to that.
I don't doubt it in the slightest. I don't think you have Samuel L. Jackson playing Uncle Sam in that context, doing the things that he did and giving the commentary that he was giving about the performance as he was giving it, if that's not what you were doing. Right.
And Samuel L. Jackson is often one to be really interesting because he's kind of cagey about his own personal politics and concepts of race a lot of the time. Right. But at the same time, the man was a deep radical in the 60s and 70s.
Deep, like...
He was an usher at MLK's funeral. Mm-hmm. So he went to the funeral and became an usher. He hung out with Stokely Carmichael. He was arrested and given a criminal conviction for holding the board of trustees at his college hostage.
Some light kidnapping.
Right. Like, you know, Samuel L. Jackson was at least intertwined with and hung out with and active in a deep radical set. Now, he denies being a member of the Black Panthers, but he hung out with a bunch of them who was part of the Black Power movement.
Let's be honest, though. His politics are only ever questioned because he is in Quentin Tarantino movies and friends with Quentin Tarantino and an avid supporter of Quentin Tarantino, and he does not try to make anything out of Tarantino's use of the N-word.
Right. In fact, I love that interview where he's like, "Say it, I'll say it with you." That one.
Yeah, and Delroy Lindo did the same thing to another interviewer.
Yeah, it was great. That's just what word? Say
Why
it.
are you bringing it up?
Yep, it was brilliant.
I think if Samuel L. Jackson had problems saying a line in a script, he wouldn't say them. Mm-hmm. He would just be like, "Nope, I'm not going to say this. This crosses a line for me." And I think most directors, if he said that to Quentin Tarantino would be like, "Okay, we'll change the script."
Yeah, no, they seem
totally, man.
Tarantino seems to actually care about his actors, right, to a degree, way more than say fucking Kubrick ever did, right?
Or Coppola, or any of the like greats.
Yeah, so Tarantino seems to actually genuinely care about his actors to a degree, and the actors that work with him seem to get along with him and like working with him.
They keep working with him over and over again. I mean, he did eventually have a falling out with Uma Thurman, but that was over a stunt gone wrong during Kill Bill Volume 2.
Right.
Which I don't blame her for. That was...
Yeah.
He fucked up on that one.
You know, and that sometimes people fuck up. But, you know, in general, he seems to get along with his actors. And so, and of course, as we've joked about, it's weird because Tarantino, we're not even sure if he knows that he's white.
I mean, Yeah. Watching him code switch when he's around an exclusively black audience is one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, it
feels weird and performative, but he's just not doing it on purpose. He can't help it. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's weird.
And so, whatever. But
we're not debating Quentin Tarantino right now.
Yeah, Samuel was a perfect choice for that. Then the way that he opens up with the revolution will be televised.
You picked the wrong time.
You picked the right time, but the wrong guy. And now there's something to be said about it maybe being him.
Right.
That he's talking about.
Yeah, he might be saying that he is not the revolutionary people want him to be.
Yep. Or that the NFL picked the wrong guy to be there because there were all these expectations that he was going to tone down certain pieces of it.
Right.
That apparently the NFL and Apple and their lawyers asked him not to say Drake's name, which we'll get into later.
Yeah. Oh, God, that was good.
Asked him not to say certain things or do certain things, and he was going to do them anyways.
Right.
Right?
Because he's Kendrick.
Fuck
you.
So he could have been saying that he's not the revolutionary everybody wants him to be. He could have been saying that he is, and that they picked the wrong guy because it's the national audience, and Uncle Sam doesn't want to see that.
Right.
Right? Or, alternatively, he could have been saying that the one guy in the audience that cost the taxpayers tens of millions of dollars to be there, who Kendrick does not seem to like at all.
No, does not seem a particularly huge fan of.
Right. That man whose fans, whose supporters don't particularly like Kendrick.
Right.
Right. And the media establishment that supports Donald Trump does not like Kendrick Lamar. Right, and talked a lot of trash about the halftime show. So he could have been making a little hat tip there. Like,
I'll say
you
this.
picked the wrong guy.
I hate Donald Trump entirely. There's nothing about him that I like or respect. I would be lying if I said it's inaccurate to call his entire everything a revolutionary moment.
Yeah.
Like, him becoming president was a revolutionary act. It was just a bad one that made things worse.
Yes.
But it was a revolutionary act. It was unprecedented. It was not something we have tried before in this country. It was a terrible mistake, but it was a revolutionary mistake.
This is true.
It was a mistake we have not quite made before in this way. Not in the modern era.
And God, we made it a second time. Oh God.
I don't think we really made the mistake until the second time.
You're probably right.
I mean, his first administration was a mess. He was incompetent. He wasn't good at the job.
But he was surrounded by a bunch of people who were quasi-establishment people. They were like establishment people on the outs, right? But they were still establishment people.
They were not fundamentally interested in completely destroying and dismantling the United States of America.
Yep.
And the current administration is. I don't know that he understands that.
No.
I don't think that he fully does.
I don't think so either.
He is more of a mouthpiece than anything else. Mm-hmm. He is not the one making decisions beyond the shit where you look at it and you're like, that's fucking stupid. Like, I'm sure the Gulf of America thing was entirely Donald Trump.
Sure.
That was 100% his fucking brain.
Let's pin in this because more about that
in a minute.
Right.
Yeah.
But so...
It's all related.
Yeah, I know it's all related. That's the beautiful part. And then yes, it's too ghetto from Uncle Sam. Like that was.
This isn't what the people want.
Right. And he's like, no, I'm going to do it. And
then he goes into the R&B stuff.
Yeah,
the nice stuff.
But first,
the stuff it's the comfortable stuff.
But what does he do first? Oh man, he opens up with Squabble Up there, baby. Yeah. Like he's like, no, I'm ready for a fight, right? And then he plays Humble. Oh, and like the clothing that the folks wore, individually, all of them in their own individual sets, right?
Yeah,
looking like they're wearing individual colors. It's like, oh, there's some like gang rivalry there. The clothing that they're wearing reminiscent of post-prison gear or like prison wear, right? Them dancing as the American flag, showing the flag divided.
That was a fucking beautiful visual.
Beautiful visual. Utilizing the field to make it look like a prison yard while it's set on a PlayStation controller with Sony being their label.
Yeah.
Right? The label Drake is under is Sony, and the whole thing looks like a PlayStation controller. Like, and then they're putting Wrong Way on in the audience. Like, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And then making the illusion that he was going to play the song, but it was going to get him sued.
Yeah, so he can't do it.
Can't do it.
Should I do it? I
I'm going
can't
to do
do
some
it.
other stuff. I'm going to do the R&B stuff. I'm going to get Drake's exes to dance on a pole and sing with me. Like, and then oh, and they were dancing in the X too.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
fucking genius. And then
You give us the song.
give us with the biggest, happiest, shit-eating grin. Now, the whole time, Kendrick is actually kind of avoiding being in frame on the camera. His face,
He's out of frame. He's
out of
not
frame.
looking directly in the camera
Like,
as much as possible.
You know, and so most of the show, he's actually hard to see, except that time he's like going down the runway, right? And like he's not centered, and his face isn't facing camera most of it, and then. Hey Drake,
I hear you like I'm young. Just fucking dead-eyed,
right to the
straight down the center of the camera.
Oh,
And especially finding out since then that he was apparently not supposed to mention Drake by name.
Yes.
And he's like, nah.
I'm gonna do it
I'm gonna
anyways.
do it.
Fuck it. Like it. See, the thing about it is that song was a story about race in America and about power dynamics in America and about what the predominant monoculture of white America wants.
Right.
It was a story.
There's also a song that Drake could have avoided being released if he'd have learned his place sooner.
That's true, yes. But so the whole show was that story, and they told it extremely well, and it stood up to power. It utilized Apple's money and Sony's money
And the NFL's money.
and his own money, because the artists have to pay to be there. But
Yeah.
that's fine. They don't get paid for it. Just so you know, they pay to be there. But so
Either invited, then they have to pay.
yep.
It's an interesting system.
It is, but you know what? The exposure from it, if you're one of the world's biggest artists, is huge.
I mean, it's you are getting the chance to perform musically on the single largest stage on the face of the planet.
Right. Because it's the most televised event next to the World Cup.
Probably the only musical performance in the last couple of years that has been seen by more people was Gojira at the Olympics.
Yep. And this one
Which was also fucking awesome.
This had the highest viewership of any Super Bowl halftime show in history.
As well it should have.
In fact, the amount, what was it, something like 20 or 40 million people stopped watching after the halftime show?
Yeah, it was just a huge... I mean, also the game was already over at that point.
The game was already over.
But
people stuck it out to watch that
Now,
halftime show.
I will say, as someone who has watched the Eagles my entire life, I have watched them blow a lead like that before. The game was not over, even though they won.
Right.
They have fucking collapsed heroically.
Yeah, but you could
being
be
up by that much.
forgiven.
But if you're a normal person
Right.
who's not a pessimistic Philly fan,
Right.
I get it.
Yeah,
I
so you
get
could
it.
be
You give up.
forgiven for looking at that game and going, oh, it's over. So, yeah, people dropped off, but they stuck around for that halftime show. And it actually seems that the halftime show itself, because there was a big spike in the viewership just before the halftime show. So it seems that people...
The only part of the game
wanted
I
to catch
actually
it.
watched was the halftime show.
I mean, I watched quite a bit.
We walked over to a neighbor's house. Didn't watch the game. Found out halftime was coming up in like 3 minutes. Walked over to a neighbor's house.
Nice.
Watched it there with the drunk neighbor.
Oh, that one?
That one.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
It's not a story we'll share on the podcast yet. Maybe someday. Maybe someday you'll get that story.
It's minutes of meeting this person. Anyway, so, but yeah, the symbolism. Drake got owned. Kendrick does more to stand up to the power structures of the United States in a 12-minute halftime show than the entire Democratic leadership has done since November.
Yeah.
Right?
Like by a lot.
By a lot. And
what are we supposed to do?
What are we supposed to do? Stand up.
Oh, no.
Good optics.
Don't be a bitch.
Don't be a bitch, yeah. And be like Kendrick. Don't be a bitch. So, good on him. It was great. I greatly appreciated it, and that's all I really wanted to say.
Yeah, it was everything I wanted it to be, and then some. Yeah, and more. Like, it was more than I expected, and everything I wanted.
And ending it with the turn the TV off there, and
people did.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, game over.
So I guess we've got to bring him up.
We do.
So, this guy right here.
That piece of shit.
This guy.
That is Curtis Yarvin.
I don't know if you know this. That guy making that face is the single most important political philosopher in the United States of America right now.
Depressingly, it is
Everything we are seeing happen in the second Trump administration is because of him personally and his writings starting in about, 2012?
Yeah.
He started the... I can't remember the name of the fucking blog, but he was...
Mencius Moldbug.
Mencius Moldbug was his name.
His pseudonym, yeah.
His pseudonym.
He's been on a few different...
He has retired that blog, but he's still... All of his writings are still available there. And if you ever want to be horrified, go read them.
The New York Times did a really good interview with them. I highly recommend reading or listening.
His name is Curtis Yarvin, by the way. I don't think we mentioned his actual name yet.
Briefly at the beginning, yeah.
Curtis Yarvin.
Curtis Yarvin. So Curtis Yarvin, a.k.a. Mencius Moldbug, started off as a chat room asshole back in the beginnings of Usenet.
Yeah, and he was a programmer, tech bro dude.
Just a nerdy tech guy who was really into computers in the early days of it.
Yeah.
And he was very big in certain chat rooms. Now, there was this thing called Black September that happened every year. Okay? And it was when the colleges would get all the new students, and the chat rooms and the boards that he was on, and he and other guys like that who had, at that point, had gotten kind of like a little bit elitist because they were important in their space, right? And then every September, Black September would happen, and there would be a wave of new students at the colleges and access to the internet.
Right.
Now they're on campus, and they would join these boards, and they would be noobs, and they would say things that were outside of the social norm for the group, and they would ask dumb questions, and they would get into arguments, and it made everything seem shitty for a month or two, right? And then they'd get bullied off and or leave, or learn the etiquette of the chat rooms,
right,
and adapt, one of the two, right? But then... You all right there?
Yeah, I'm just tired.
All right, well.
It's been a long couple days.
Take some deep breaths there, because yawning on camera. We're all right. More people watch than listen.
It's true.
All right.
We're talking about this fucking dipshit, too.
Yeah. So then what happened is that the internet gets democratized and becomes available for everybody, and home PCs start to crop up. And this guy was eternally offended at the concept of Eternal September, is what they called it.
Okay.
Right? Which is now everybody... All the time has access to their spaces, and
they don't like that.
These nerdy tech weirdos that were just early computer adopters saw themselves as elitists. Now, a bunch of people in the spaces wanted to democratize data and information, but guys like him didn't. And then he started going down these rabbit holes. Now, so to get to know him about that's one of his animating features, right?
Yeah.
And in a very Freudian way, both his parents worked for the federal government.
Shocking.
I
would have never guessed such a thing.
Upper middle class, child of bureaucrats.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't know what's going on with the green screen.
It's getting dark in here. We're going to turn some lights on. There we go. That's better. That's better.
There we
go.
All right, cool. So, yeah, very Freudian kind of thing. It's very right on the nose, isn't it?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So, what do you know about him?
I know that he is coined the phrase neo-reactionary.
Correct. He and a guy named Nick Land.
And that he is in circles that, as far as people like Elon Musk and J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel go, he is their go-to guy. He is the
Right.
guy they go to for all of their ideas, all of their thoughts. He has created their entire culture.
To a degree, yes. So
I mean, he codified it and he popularized it, and he is the guy that they look to as their voice.
yeah,
J.D. Vance in particular has openly mentioned him multiple times, because if there's one thing that I don't know that people have noticed, it's that the left will incessantly tell you need to read theory.
Right.
They will tell you what theory you need to read. They will tell you what authors you need to read. The right pretends they don't have any theory. The
You're
right
right.
pretends that they don't have thought leaders who are telling them what to think, who are giving them their ideas.
yeah.
And who are
outside the
creating their
libertarian movement.
platforms.
The
Right.
libertarians have a bunch of those guys, right? You know, like Nozick and
Fucking Mies and
Mises and
all those fucking idiots.
yes, and Rothbard.
Yeah.
You know, but again,
Your
two of
normal
the three I just listed are
conservatives-
dead.
Yeah.
Right.
Yarvin is only 51.
Yeah.
He is a young man.
Still alive.
As far
Lives in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And
Unlike a lot of people in the Bay Area, not in his car.
yeah, right.
He has a home.
Yep. He is an upper middle class tech bro blogger living in the Bay Area, and so he's an elitist. He believes in a kind of monarchy.
It basically views the government as being, or society as a whole being like a corporation.
Correct, and he wants
And he wants a CEO at the top who has like total power over the corporation that is society.
Yeah, he actually kind of wants two CEOs, right? He wants basically a pairing team of two different styled CEOs that one will manage certain aspects while the other does the tech bro startup thing.
Right.
And moves fast and breaks stuff. Where have we seen this?
I can't imagine where we've seen it lately.
Yeah. It's not like it doesn't look exactly like the fucking news today. And the end goal, he makes a lot of really bad historical arguments. He cherry picks moments in history.
And a lot of his theories and ideas are mutually exclusive and contradictory with themselves.
Yes.
He says a lot of things. He'll say two things that cannot exist in the same space.
No, yeah,
and
absolutely.
he necessarily believes both of them at the same time.
He has basically argued that America needs to get over its dictator phobia because, and here is three reasons. One, that George Washington, and it's telling how much he's influenced by the tech bro venture capital world, because he talks in terms that only, like, I never talk in terms of like startups and shit like that. Like,
No.
when I am building a new location for my business or building my business, I don't go, I'm a startup. Right?
No.
I don't think that
No.
way. I think
It's weird.
I'm building my thing, my business, right? My space. And I don't talk in those terms. He does, right?
About everything.
About everything.
All the time.
And he makes an allegory about like how at the time of the founding and George Washington, the post constitutional era, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, George Washington is acting like a founder. It's a startup, right? And he's like, it's very much like a startup. Like, and he is a bit of a dictator, just making things happen.
If I recall, they offered him the chance to be all that, and he said no.
Yeah, he did turn it down.
He said no.
He's known as he was known as the modern Cincinnatus because of it. You know,
For all his flaws, and he had many.
Yep.
Not a perfect.
No.
Oh boy, not
Ask
a
about his
perfect.
slave teeth. But it's like, well, no, we were forming a country there, yes. So there are some aspects of like how dictatorships work, I guess, that, you know, if it's never been done before,
you
you're
are
feeling
figuring out the limits of your own authority.
Yep. And then he references Lincoln again in a very cherry-picked model. But again, nation in crisis, split in half, entire country at war. And then he mentions FDR, who he says is basically just a monarch through his term. And like, in some ways, yes, in some ways, no. FDR still was constrained by the law in many ways. Yes, he knew that he could have, say,
I
packed
will
the
say,
court.
I have seen a lot of talk in the last couple of weeks about how Trump is allowed to do everything that he's doing because FDR. I've seen a lot of that in the last couple weeks.
All right. First, FDR pushed and tested the limits past where they should have gone, and we've corrected some of that mistake.
That's why there's a 22nd Amendment.
Right. There's a 22nd Amendment for that reason, but also there are a number of like anti-nepotism laws, anti-corruption laws, anti-bribery statutes that have gone into effect since he was in power because of, it was going from one system to another. Basically, the bureaucratic state as we know it sprung out of FDR's New Deal.
We got very lucky that he was not more dictatorial in his thinking.
Yes.
Because he could have been our first dictator if he wanted to.
And it's because he was so goddamn popular,
Right.
though. And it's not just... And therein lies the other
and
thing.
It's not Trump popularity either. Like,
No.
it is impossible to really look at how popular... Like, Trump got 29% of the eligible vote.
Yeah.
The largest voting bloc were people who didn't bother to vote.
On his lowest point, FDR got like half
Yeah.
the vote. Like,
It's
and
not even this... Like, that's a mandate.
half the eligible vote. Like,
Yeah,
at his
that's
lowest
insane.
point.
And overwhelming majorities
In the House.
In the
and
House and the Senate.
Yeah, and he still had to campaign, and he ran against his opponents, and every midterm he was out there, like, campaigning on behalf of his party to make sure that
he maintained those margins. Because he knew he wouldn't get away with what he wanted to do otherwise.
Yeah, so he rode his popularity, and but he was still constrained by the law, right?
And whereas when Trump goes out and campaigns for somebody in a primary, they fucking lose.
Yeah. And so we've got that hiccup. He's not like that. And again, all three of these are points of crisis and great change. We're not in a massive point of crisis. COVID was a bit of a crisis, but
COVID was the closest we have come in the modern era to a true crisis since World War II.
Yeah. The 08 crash is maybe arguable, but not.
Even that.
Yeah, it wasn't.
We did better than a lot of places.
Yeah, and we didn't drop as far as the Great Depression. It was the worst thing since the Depression, but clearly, like, the effects of it were,
But it's important to
like
understand
2 to
that
6 years.
It's important to understand that worst thing since is not the same as bad as.
Right.
And we have a tendency to forget that.
That's very true.
In this country.
And so, but he makes these really specious arguments. He once argued that you shouldn't ask one to celebrate Nelson Mandela while condemning Anders Breivik. Do you want to take that? Take it. You know more about Anders than I do. I love Mandela, but oof.
I don't even really know where to begin. Like, it hurts. It hurts to even hear somebody say something like that.
Yeah.
Because it's so... No.
Right. Like one can...
And if there's something that Yarvin is good at, is it's making statements that are so insane and detached from reality that it's hard to know how to respond to them.
But he tries to couch it in something that sounds very reasonable.
He does.
Because the next phrase of his argument
He's
is
very
that,
good at sounding reasonable.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't sound like a crank, no
Right.
matter how crazy the shit he's saying is.
Because the next thing he's going to say after he says that is because, well, you see, they both went outside the acceptable rules of war, and they were both terrorists. So that's the moral equivalency. And there was a racial motivation involved in both cases.
But obviously, it's the same.
Obviously the same. It's like, ooh, okay, I see what you did there, you sneaky fuck.
Yeah.
So Anders Breivik murdered a bunch of people.
Is it 77? Something like that?
Yeah.
It was a large...
Lot of people.
A shockingly large number, especially for Europe.
Because he wanted to stop Muslim immigration from happening in his country, and he wanted the Muslims expelled.
Yes.
And so his terrorism was like a racial and religious motivated hate crime against like 77 people, and he murdered a ton of people,
right,
with the motivation to like alter immigration policy. Right. Nelson Mandela did blow up some things. Very, very few civilians died in things that he did. Now, the ANC that he was a part of did some horrific things, most of it while he was in prison.
Right.
Some of them while he was out, while he was one of the leaders, including like, the whole putting a tire over somebody and setting him on fire.
There are limits.
But
there are I do believe there are limits.
Yeah, Mandela did not direct most of those things. He wanted targeted bombings, and when he was in charge, like he had limited the ANC's violence.
It was much more like the IRA.
Yeah,
during the Troubles, where
right,
they'd blow up something, but it'd be like, we're gonna blow this shit up.
Yep.
You better get all the civilians out of the way.
And so Mandela winds up doing prison time. But the other thing that Mandela was protesting was, the brutal apartheid regime in South Africa, which was, yes, in part about race. It was about a bunch of racists who owned a military that was supported by the military powers of the West,
right,
enslaving a population and then keeping them as second-class citizens, despite being the majority of the population.
We had to invent a word for it.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen often.
When you invent a word for,
that
your form of government. I mean, they did it themselves. That's the best part.
Yeah,
they invented their own word for it, because they were like, well, I mean, we've got to keep them apart, so it's apartheid.
That's apartheid.
Like, oof.
And it's not coincidental that two of the people who most love Yarvin's thinking are themselves South Africans.
Yep.
In Peter Thiel, South African indirectly. Like by blood, but he's born in Germany and raised in Europe and came to the States. And fucking Elon.
And the third, who's a fan of his, not to the same degree, but David Sachs, who, while born in the United States, lived in South Africa through most of his childhood.
I know Mark Andreessen is a big fan, too.
Yeah. There's a new guy going in at State that's a big fan of his as well. And, of course, a number of...
I mean, the vice president has cited him as one of the most important thinkers in the modern era.
And then the staffers for these guys. See, that's the thing, is a bunch of guys, of young staffers on the right read him, and they circulate his ideas. And where the ideas really come from in Washington are the staffers, right?
Right, because they're the edgelords. They're the ones who know how to meme.
Yep, but they're also just generally in for both parties. They're kind of the brains of the operation, right?
They're the ones. I mean,
they have a pulse on what's actually happening out in the world.
You can't get anything done without the youth vote.
Yeah, they have a pulse on what's happening out in the world. They know more about the youth vote. They have the time, not the time per se, but they do more like reading on subjects and topics, right? And they influence their whatever elected representative they work for, or whatever appointed person they work for. They influence that person's policy and thinking.
I think when you're young, there's just an inherent ease to staying on top of that in a way that as you age, you lose unless you actively put effort into maintaining it.
Yeah, aside from skimming news stuff, I do like 90% less reading than I used to.
Yeah,
like it's just,
same.
I don't have the time for it. I have too many other things going on. I don't have the bandwidth anymore. So, don't have a lot of time for reading as I did, try as I might.
No, not like we used to. I get tired, too. Like, it's physically harder for me to read. I can't sit there and read for hours on end anymore, like physically.
Yep.
It's more difficult than it used to be. My eyes are older.
Don't age, kids.
Those fucking young children, though.
They're doing some reading.
They can spend hours a day that they're not actually interacting with other human beings reading nonsense. Mm-hmm. Whether that's books by lunatics or just nonsense on message boards online. Because message boards are still out there. They're just not prevalent in the popular culture the way they used to be.
Right.
You still have Poll, which is still shockingly influential over on 4chan, which I hate to recommend 4chan.
Do not go to Poll.
But
don't. Self-care, don't do it.
Yeah, if you want a good idea of why things are the way they are, you can learn a lot about how that side of the political spectrum creates its thought.
It's fair.
On Poll, but it's a horrible place.
Just remember, though.
Hate being there.
Yeah. Remember, we're going to recommend some things that you check out because we want to do that and we want you to be informed.
Right.
But if you don't want to sift through the garbage, we will endure the suffering for you.
That's what we're here for.
We know that political burnout is easy, especially for most of you who haven't been ridiculous political junkies their whole lives, like the two idiots here on camera.
Yeah, I would love to be able to stop.
Yeah,
it's not healthy.
Yeah,
but if I'm gonna do it anyway, I might as well
do this,
broadcast it, and do it so other people don't have to.
Right. I can't turn it off. I have to look.
Yeah.
It's something that's just ingrained in me, has been forever. It's probably had a big impact on my relationships, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I have realized I was born to doom scroll.
Same.
To the point where I'm not sure what I did before doom scrolling was a thing. Like, I don't remember life before the internet.
Right.
Much at all.
I mean, I remember existing.
Yeah.
I did stuff. I was out and about all the time, riding my bike. I was bored, though.
We were kids.
Yeah.
We were kids.
I was bored as hell. But then when the internet came around, as soon as doom scrolling could be a thing, which it's before the term was coined. Like,
right. There was no social media.
Right.
It was... You went from website to website. I mean, I remember before search engines.
Yeah.
Like, finding new content was difficult. You had to go through web rings. You had to go through indexes of websites on, like, web servers where they would have, like, all of the pages on the site.
Right. You had to talk to friends who
Talk to friends who knew a website they could send you to. You had to just randomly type in URLs.
Yep. And
I think we all found Rotten.com the same dumb way. What if I type in Rotten.com? Oh, shit.
Oh, and Vomit Lunch. Now, that was...
I don't remember Vomit Lunch. I remember the Style Project and Rotten.com.
I loved Rotten.com. I went to some sites. I remember my favorite one was this. I just kept going to it because it was funny. But it was this this chat room for gay Nazis.
Okay.
It was fantastic.
I'm sure it was a time.
Because, like, the banner, you had, like, you had a swastika flag on one side, and then, like, the old, like, just the standard rainbow flag on the other.
Gotcha.
And then, like, it had this, like, this very pretty Aryan boy staring at, like, this very pretty, like, Viking boy, right? And they're just staring at each other longingly. And it was like this drawn art.
So Twitter now.
Yeah, it was Twitter now,
basically.
And then there was the chat room, and it was a fascinating place.
These people who are like acolytes of guys like Yarvin still inhabit those kind of spaces online.
They do.
In a way the rest of us don't. And they have the time to do it because they don't have the social world otherwise to have anything else to do.
Yeah.
And then they regurgitate that to their fucking employers who are fucking politicians.
Right. Speaking of Yarvin, there are so many things he gets wrong because he likes to cherry pick history and world events and successes, right?
Yeah.
And he does that to build his case, and he builds his framework. I was just listening to that great New York Times interview. You caught a couple of minutes of it because we took a break. So, just catching back up in the last few minutes of it. He has this tendency to, like, claim that basically that Stalin and the Holocaust and the other dictatorships of the 20th century can't be teased out from the democratic movements of their time, right? That they're basically... That before then, when Europe was monarchies, like, everything was better.
Yeah, that just didn't happen.
Right.
You didn't see a Holocaust when there were monarchies?
Yeah.
Inquisition, sure, but never a Holocaust.
Here's the thing, is mass murder on an industrial scale, the way that it did under Stalin and Hitler, couldn't happen before industrialization.
No, it wasn't possible logistically. You couldn't move at that rate.
But they're not independently unique in that humans being terrible to humans and people at the top brutalizing people below them. That's a story as old as time.
If medieval and Renaissance monarchs had the ability to have that sort of efficiency of killing,
yes,
they'd have done it.
Absolutely.
They'd have done it without hesitation to far greater degrees than either of our major dictators of the 20th century did.
Yes. And he overemphasizes that and talks about Europe in a way that makes it sound way more peaceful and ignores a bunch of massacres that happened and some ethnic cleansings that happened and just pretends that
King Leopold didn't exist in Curtis Yarvin's world.
Yeah. And so he does that. He has this bad tendency of overemphasizing how good CEOs are at their jobs.
Which they're not. They're like, you can just look at the data, and a lot of businesses... succeed despite their CEOs.
Yes, a lot of businesses succeed despite their CEOs. Most startups fail, so more CEOs are failures than successes. Most companies change their CEOs every few years, so more CEOs are failures rather than successes. It's just a factor of a governed world that has stabilized a market so that the plutocrats make a bunch of money. Line always go up, right?
Yeah.
And And when line go down, they just replace the next guy, and so we never see how bad CEOs are. He overemphasizes how great guys like Musk are because all he is a fucking P.T. Barnum character.
Yeah, and
he's not good at anything.
Elon Musk is a man who has never actually created anything.
No.
He has bought companies and bought the ability to call himself a founder, but he has not been the founder.
Yeah, and you look at his companies, and he's actually nowhere near as involved as he pretends he is.
He's never the primary engineer. He doesn't know the engineering. He doesn't know the computing.
Even on the management end, SpaceX is successful in spite of, and because the person under him has a great contract that firewalls him away from everything.
He has not been able to get the security clearance necessary to sit in on the SpaceX meetings with, like, the military.
Yep. Speaking of SpaceX, that's another... He gives this as an example because he's like, NASA used to be great. It used to be as good as SpaceX, Yarvin says, right? It's like, but now it's not because government inefficiency. It's like, no. One, they were never as good as SpaceX. Here's what SpaceX can do. SpaceX is allowed to blow up 90 rockets.
Yeah.
NASA is not.
Yeah,
right?
SpaceX is allowed to try and fail in a way that NASA couldn't get away with.
Correct. And the bureaucratic process is expensive at NASA, sure. So cutting that out and just giving SpaceX a check cuts like 25% of the cost right off the top.
Yeah.
Right? 25% of the cost is cut right off the top by handing them a check and having them do it, right? And then when they blow things up and they break stuff, they can do it a bit cheaper each time, right? And they don't have federal oversight. They don't have the House calling them in to be questioned when a rocket blows up every single time.
There's less accountability.
Way less accountability. They can move fast and break stuff.
Not having accountability is inherently cheaper. That doesn't mean it's better, but it is cheaper.
Yeah. And now look, if that's how we're going to make rockets now, great. Okay. Here's the thing. In order to make rockets the first times, it required the long, expensive bureaucratic process of using the government to do it, and to take the losses on the being the first to market and the first to create them, and then handing over a bunch of patents and IP to SpaceX and money to SpaceX so they could innovate off of that, right? They can do it faster and cheaper, yes, now. But it required the big investment of you, me, and the taxpayer to get there.
Well, it's like all things. The infrastructure to do these things doesn't just emerge itself. It's not an emergent property of society. We have to build that infrastructure in order to have the industry to build on top of the infrastructure.
Guys like Yarvin, again, he references Apple sometimes because it's this giant top-down corporation. He views corporations like monarchies. And he keeps talking, like, interchanging these pieces of language. And it's like, okay.
Well, that's why his philosophy is called Techno-feudalism. He sees... the tech sphere as being like a kind of monarch that we all work for.
Dangerous as that is. But here's the thing about Apple. It got a lot of government largesse to help it maintain its dominance and get off the ground. But on top of that, the thing that we all forget, GPS was a very expensive technology to create. Who created it? DARPA.
Not Apple.
Not Apple. Right. It was very expensive. And
the internet. The internet was not created by private industry.
No, it was public spending that created the backbone of the internet.
It was Al Gore, as he likes to say.
But I mean, he authored the bill.
Yeah,
that's why
he has as good of a claim to being the father of the internet as anyone living today.
Yep. Other than the guys that did
the physical work of like developing the infrastructure
between DARPA and Usenet and the guys over at the University of Michigan, right? But that was just it. Like a university and a federal agency, a Department of Defense offshoot, right, and a couple of other universities built the internet. Public.
None of this happens without public influence and public investment.
And it was public money that built the infrastructure that's the backbone of the internet. Now the rest of it's privatized.
Yeah.
Like that's how that works. Again, the big initial investment.
You can like or dislike that as much as you want, but the basic infrastructure that it is all built upon was public.
Yeah. And it's still like that infrastructure was like of the internet that exists today is like 20 to 30% of the actual physical internet.
Yeah.
And of the And the backbone that was built off of that, like the private backbone that accounts for like 44% of the traffic of the internet, where it all flows over, right? That still had a bunch of public investment into private companies.
And you have a lot of the people behind this. A lot of the companies behind this are NPOs.
And so guys like Yarvin get this wrong. But he believes that democracy is a mistake because freedom is freedom and power is power, is kind of how he tries to delineate it. And he thinks that it's an illusion of freedom when we have the right to vote, right?
Yes.
And it's because voting is power, or at least the illusion of power, as he likes to put it. And to a degree, that's true. It's power, an illusion to power. Illusion of power.
When you vote for people and it feels like they're not doing what you want them to, it does feel like you have not actually done anything.
But it's an exercise of power.
Right.
Right. But here's the thing is, in a state of nature, because I know the natural rights guys, especially in the libertarian side or on the right, like to argue about this. In the state of nature, there are no rights. There are no intrinsic, inherent, natural rights.
No, everything about human civilization is a social construct we created for ourselves. Like, you can't argue beyond that. Aside from like our biological impulses to like eat and piss and shit and breed, like, it's all bullshit we made up otherwise.
Right. And one can argue that maybe free speech is an individual right because it comes from free thought. But again, free thought isn't always necessarily free. And the right to free speech, if something can be taken away by force, it's not a natural right.
Right.
And one can easily take the right to speak away by force.
One can easily take any right away by force.
Yep. And so, while the libertarian folks might argue with me on this, I don't care. You'll have to sell me on the idea of natural rights and do it in a way that doesn't use your weird circular logic. And I used to be a libertarian, so I bet you can't.
Yeah. You done heard that already.
I done heard it already. I done read it all. It didn't persuade me anymore because I thought past it. And
it's one of those things that feels like common sense until you think about it too deeply.
Yeah. But so he argues that it's an illusion of power, which is true. But you don't have any other rights unless you have the power to keep and enforce them. And so governing by the consent of the governed is a way of protecting the rest of your freedoms.
Right. And if
he disputes that.
If you have purely top-down hierarchical power, how can you protect any freedom?
You can't.
He doesn't have an answer for that.
No. He won't.
He doesn't think there needs to be an answer for that.
Right. And he thinks that these things, if you just pick CEOs and leaders and monarchs that love freedom, love free speech, love their people,
that this will just happen
right
by itself.
It doesn't.
No, nothing.
It never does.
It's not how anything works.
But then, he'll ask about, like, certain times that you've argued around, like, the robber baron eras, etc., or, Victorian times, you've argued about how good things were then. Like, well, women didn't have it so great. He goes, well, I've read Jane Austen, and the women seemed great. And it's like, yeah, it seemed great, except that, one, those were upper-class women, and two, they all were in a rush to find a husband because they had no economic resources without that. They were trapped.
They had nothing. They had nothing.
And if they didn't find a husband, they were in trouble, right? Like their world was going to be problematic, and they'd have to live off the largesse of their parents for the rest of their days, and
until they died,
and hope that fucking continued.
Lasted. Yeah.
That's not a beneficial or healthy society. That those women didn't have freedom.
No,
they didn't have liberty. They didn't have power, and he argues that it wasn't so bad. Like, no, fuck you.
And it wasn't so bad for people who looked like him.
Right. And were of a certain socioeconomic class.
Which includes him.
Right. It's amazing.
It's amazing how things were great for people who were in exactly his position.
Yeah. And
that nothing else really mattered.
Isn't it?
It's almost like there's a lesson in there somewhere.
I mean, that seems to be the lesson that we're learning. And he's had this big influence on the right.
Yeah.
What's funny is he actually calls conservatism a dead project that doesn't know it's dead, though. That's fascinating. He has a lot of weird and interesting and kind of funny things to say about the rest of the people in their coalition, like evangelicals. He thinks they're delusional.
They are delusional.
Right.
He's not wrong about that.
Yeah. He thinks that the religious right is basically just a tool to power.
It's all they've been used for.
Yeah.
They are not the ones who are going to get what they want out of all of this.
Right.
Like, I don't know if they've realized that. I know they haven't realized that yet. They are not the ones. They're going to get tiny concessions that aren't going to last forever.
Yeah, and the concessions that they're getting, the reason that they're around, like, abortions and women's rights, and you guys think you're getting your victories, is because these guys don't care about women, right? Like,
Right.
that's mainly it. They, one, just don't care about women, and two, they have this whole, like, white nationalist, like, weirdo view that if they just keep popping out upper middle class white babies, like,
Everything will work out.
and they can dominate society forever, right? They're not your allies, guys. Like, they're just
No.
turning you into quasi-Nazis, even though you used to think of yourselves as good people because you believed in Christ. But
Yeah.
you've been very un-Christ-like the last
Yeah.
30 years. You know, but that's just it. We can... If there are any evangelicals that do ever catch this video, like...
They might. I hope
yeah,
they do.
I hope you do. Curtis Yarvin,
Not your friend.
not your friend.
He hates you.
Which makes Elon Musk not your friend.
Honestly, these people might think less of you than I do.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, because I, at least, as much as you frustrate me and anger me and infuriate me, I know you're human beings who have some inherent value as a human being. They do not think of you that way.
No.
They do not think of anyone that way. You are all NPCs who exist for their benefit. You are not a real person to any of these people.
Elon
they
Musk.
are sociopaths.
Elon Musk wants to use you.
Right.
Donald Trump wants to use you.
And the
J.D.
instant-
Vance is using
the
you.
instant they have no utility left for you, you are gone
Yeah.
forever, cast aside, and they will ruin your fucking lives
Yeah.
just for fun.
So, you know, just go back and remember that the only reason you hate abortion is because you were told to after Bob Jones University was forced to desegregate, and get over it.
Yeah.
The Bible doesn't say what you think it says about
No.
fucking babies.
Read your actual book.
Read the book.
Sit and read your book. I've read your book. Have you read your book?
Like, there's some parts of the New Testament that are fucking great.
Jesus said some good shit, man.
Yeah.
He said some good shit.
Like-
I fuck with Jesus
Like,
in a lot of ways.
The Gandhi quote, right?
Yeah.
I like your Jesus. It's not so much his followers or the Christians that I like, but I love your Christ. Like, he had some good
Be more
shit to say.
Christ-like
Yeah.
instead of Christian.
And trust me, your God doesn't really care about kids. He sent a fucking bear to murder 40 children because somebody made fun of a bald guy.
If God cared about pregnancies going to term, 85% of them wouldn't end in spontaneous abortion.
85%
Have
naturally.
you ever had a period that seemed unusually heavy? Guess what?
Could have been an abortion.
Almost definitely a miscarriage.
God killed your baby.
God killed your babies.
Sorry. You ever notice how many evangelicals can't have kids? It's fucking, isn't it? Like, it.
That's why they went so apeshit when they accidentally banned IVF in fucking
Yeah.
Mississippi or wherever it was.
Like, that one fascinates me.
Yeah.
I think there's just, I really wish I could fucking understand the psychology of everyone. Like, I get fascinated by people I don't understand, and I'm pretty good at understanding people's psychology, but certain parts of the right, I'm just like, oh, I really want to therapize you, but you won't go to therapy.
Right.
I wish I could fucking tape your therapy sessions and fucking have you psychoanalyzed, because the way you make decisions.
Bit ponderous.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So that's Curtis Yarvin.
It's Curtis Yarvin. I suggest you go read his bullshit so you get a better understanding of him. It's all on the internet.
Yep.
Readily available. It's easy to find.
If you don't want to do that, the New York Times interview with him, it's both available in audio version and...
I would describe it as illuminating.
Yep. Vox had a good piece on him, Politico. I will say, as a problem, most of the really good pieces on him are paywalled. Like, even on sites that don't usually paywall, like Politico and Vox.
Again, like I said,
Both moved it over to their paid editorial content.
this is one of those times where the right doesn't want us to know what they're thinking or why they're thinking it or where they're getting their ideas.
Yeah, but, like, Politico and Vox aren't typically known...
Politico has gotten worse about paywalling all sorts of shit lately.
Yeah.
It's becoming really fucking frustrating.
And it's like, here's the thing, is, you know... this guy's blog isn't paywalled. Like,
No, you can just go read it.
go read it. It's harder to find because he's a harder to find writer.
His old blog is still up there, Meniscus Molebug.
Mencius.
Mencius.
But, I mean, meniscus.
Meniscus. He's a fucking... Look at him. Look at him.
Mucus moldbug.
Look at that man.
Look at that face.
Look at that. Look at that face.
That's not even the worst picture of him on the internet. There's even worse out there.
I just found the one that seemed the cringiest and the most Big Brother.
There are so few. There's not a lot of images of him, but there are a bunch out there.
They're all grainy as fuck. This was from the New York Times interview.
Yeah. The Guardian article on him has his hair's flowing and he's like
the wind.
squinting in the wind. Like, it's fucking. Oh, this guy.
Ugh.
He and a few other writers are a big part of the influence behind this stuff. They are. It's funny, is he thinks that the right is full of grifters. Like, he argues about that, which he's not wrong.
No, he's not wrong.
And, you know, the one thing that scares me about him is that he is clear-eyed about that stuff, right? Yeah. And he talks about the rest of the right wing as tools in a way that guys like J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel and Elon Musk can gravitate towards and understand, right? And he understands how much of the right is a grift.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the best way to explain him is he is your least favorite person's favorite thinker.
Right. And
so it's important to know what he's thinking and where they're getting their ideas.
And so, like, Shapiro and Matt Walsh are massive grifters, right?
Right. Especially Walsh.
But they only really influence a small segment of right-wing politics.
Right.
Right? Their ideas are incredibly unpopular in the middle, right? Nothing they say.
They don't have the ear of politicians and thought leaders.
Not in the same way.
Not in the same way.
Like, yeah, they've got a few that they get along with and they know, and that will listen to them. Like, you know, the Ted Cruz types and the ones who fucking suck off, like the fucking.
Right. But Ted Cruz is just trying to be terrible for the sake of being terrible anyway. So he
but the guys who go to Liberty University to fucking hang out with them, they'll listen to fucking Matt Walsh, right? But the rest of the right doesn't.
No.
And Curtis Yarvin understands them as a tool, and he and Thiel and Musk, and others like them, all see the rest of the right as one giant weapon to be mobilized, and that should scare the rest of us.
Yep, I think that's a good place to leave it off.
It is.
We'll do this again next week.
Yeah,
it'll be a time. Until then, this has been the Grift Show.
Give us all of your fucking money.
Give us all of your fucking money.